Welcome to the video on sketching graphs. So first we'll talk about creating a graph. So when you're creating a graph, your function, your f of x, is equal to y. So you'll have your x value and your y value, which is your f of x. When you're sketching a function, you just need the shape, the key features, and labeled axes. But when you're drawing, it needs to be drawn to scale. So you need numbers on the axes as well as the shape, the key features, and the labeled axes. So some of the key features, which we'll talk about in a later video, are the maximums, minimums, x-intercepts, y-intercepts, etc. So if we were just sketching the graph of x squared, we could draw something like this, where we have our x-axis, our y-axis, and a little U-shaped parabola. You would want to write your x and y intercept at 0, 0. And that's really all you need for a quick sketch. When you're drawing one, you would need to do your x and y axes, and you would need to have some points. So you'd have your 0, 0, and then 1 squared is 1. So you'd put 1, comma, 1. 2 squared is 4, so you'd have 2, 3, 4, and you'd put a point there. You'd also have that in the negative direction. Negative 1 squared is 1, negative 2 squared is 4, and you would actually need to have that scale there if you're going to draw. So this is one when they ask you to draw versus sketch. So for graphing with technology, we have the TI-84 Plus C Silver Edition calculator. It's one of the most common calculators used on the IB test. So we're going to learn how to graph functions, graph sums and differences, and we're going to see an example where we will graph two functions, their sum and their difference. So once your calculator is on, to graph the function, you'll go to y equals and type your first function. So you'll type 3x squared minus 4. And then to type your second function, you can go down and type the square root. So you click second to get to these blue things. So second square root of x plus 3. And then we can click graph. So our first function was where the y equals was blue. So this is a quadratic function. And our red function is our square root function. So to find the solutions, that would be where these lines intersect. So you can calculate those by clicking second, and then where it says trace, above it in blue it says calculate. So you'll click that, and you can go down until it says intersect, or you can just press 5. So you'll find close to the intersection on the first curve. So you'll get as close to it as you can, and then click enter. And then you'll move around that same spot on the second curve and click enter, and then you can hit enter again for it to guess the intersection. So our first intersection is when x equals negative 1.33 and y equals 1.29. Our second intersection, we'll go to second calculate and go down to intersect, and then move our cursor close to where the second intersection point is and click enter, enter, enter. So our second intersection is when x is 1.43 and y is 2.10. So that's how you find your intersection points. Now if we wanted to find the sum of these, you can go down to y3, and if you click this vars button and go over to yvars, enter function y1. So this is pulling our first function, our 3x squared minus 4, and then say plus vars, yvars, function, and we'll go down to y2 this time. So y1 plus y2. And if we only want it to graph that one, we can go onto the equal sign and click enter. If it's not highlighted, then that means it won't graph it. So we're just going to graph our sum this time. So here's our sum of those two functions. Finally, we can graph the difference by going down to y3, and we can just change the plus into a minus and hit graph. So there's the difference of those two functions. So that's how you would Enter functions and find the sum and difference of functions on your calculator. So here we have our first practice question. It says, sketch the function y equals x squared plus 3x plus 1. So we should know quite a bit about our quadratic functions. We'll learn more about them in another video. But if you don't have any idea about a function, you can simply plug in numbers for x and figure out what the y values are. So for here, we'll plug in values for x equals -1, 0, 1, 2, and 3, and go from there. So I'll actually turn this into a table. So these are our x values, and then here we'll put our y values. So when x is -1, we have y equals x squared, so -1 squared, plus 3 times -1 plus 1. So -1 squared is 1. 3 times -1 is -3, so we'll do -3, and then plus 1. 1 minus 3 is -2, plus 1 is -1. So our output would be -1. When we plug in 0, we'd have 0 squared plus 3 times 0, so plus 0 plus 1. So our output will be 1. For 1, we'll have y equals 1 squared plus 3 times 1 plus 1. So that's 1 plus 3 plus 1, which equals 5. For 2, we'll have y equals 2 squared plus 3 times 2 plus 1. So that's 4 plus 6 plus 1, which equals 11. So our numbers are getting farther and farther apart. So we're not getting close to our vertex. We're going to want to go to the negative numbers. So we'll do -2 for x. So y equals -2 squared plus 3 times -2 plus 1. So that's going to be -2 squared is 4. 3 times -2 is -6 plus 1. 4 minus 6 is -2 plus 1 is -1. So for graphing this, around -1 we have -1. So it'll be somewhere around there. 0, 1, 1, 5, 2, 11, and then -2, -1, so that's the same. So when we sketch our function, it'll be something like that. A little bit more of a curve at the end. So we'll label our x and y axis. We'll draw our function with the arrows. We don't need to include a scale because we're sketching and not drawing. We can put that our y-intercept is 1, because when x is 0, y is 1. Our minimum is going to be right between -1 and -2, because those values are the same, so our minimum will be at -1.5. And that's about all we need for a simple sketch of a function. So here we have our first IB practice question. It says for the function f of x equals 2x squared plus 3x plus 4 over x, where x cannot equal 0, find f of 2. So where x is 2, so we'll start by putting f of x into y equals. So y equals 2x squared plus 3x plus, and then we'll put 4 over x in parentheses just to make it clear that that is a one fraction. So then we'll graph it. It takes a second to load. So you can see there's a part of the function coming down here, and then we have a minimum there. So let's zoom out a little bit to see more of our function. So you can do zoom out and then click enter to zoom out from the origin. So that's what our function looks like. We need to find f of 2. So we'll enter calc and then 2, and that'll tell us what y is when x is 2. So f of 2 equals 16. Next, we need to find when f of x equals 19. So we want to know when y equals 19. So to do this, we can make a line where y equals 19. So we'll graph that. And then we have two intersection points. So there's two x values where y equals 19. So we'll do second calc and go down to intersect. So we'll move near our first intersection and then hit enter 3 times. 1, 2, 3. So when y is 19, we'll have x equals -4. And then we'll do our second intersection. So we'll do second calc and go down to intersect and move near our second one and then hit enter 3 times. So our second intersection point would be when x equals 2.28. Finally, we need to find the coordinate of the local minimum. So we'll do second calc down to minimum, and our local minimum is going to be around here. So it says from the left, we'll make sure we're on this second one, click enter, go over, click enter again, and it says we have a minimum at x equals 0.803 and y equals 8.6799. So that's how you would do this problem with your calculator. So now we have our second IB practice question. It says on the same graph, sketch the functions y equals -1/3 times the absolute value of x and y equals 3 times the absolute value of x plus b. So we'll call this first one y1 and the second one y2, and we'll create a table with some values. So we have x, y1, and y2. So when x equals -3, y1 would be -1/3 times the absolute value of -3, so times 3. So that'll give us -1. And y2 will be 3 times the absolute value of -3, so 3 times 3 is 9 plus b. So this will be 9 plus b. When x is -2, we'll have -2/3 for y1 and 6 plus b for y2. When x is -1, we'll have -1/3 for y1 and 3 plus b for y2. When x is 0, y1 is 0, and y2 is b. When x is 1, we have -1/3. When y is 1, we have 3 plus b. And if you notice, our 1 and -1 are going to be the same because our x's are inside of absolute value signs. So our 2 is going to be the same as -2. So it'll be -2/3, 6 plus b, and then 3 will be -1 and 9 plus b. So for our graph, we're going to do it on one graph. So we have x and y. We'll start by graphing y1. So when x is -3, so we'll do -1, 2, 3, +1, 2, 3. We just have to sketch it, so it doesn't matter if we have a scale or not. But since we wrote down these points, we might as well. So we have a point at -3, -1. So we'll draw our -1 on here. And then -2, -2/3, -1, -1/3, 0, 0, 1, -1/3, 2, -2/3, and 3, -1. So our absolute value functions create a little v. So this is our y1. And then for our y2, when x is -3, y2 is 9 plus b. So 9 plus some number b. And then we'll have a 6 plus b, 3 plus b, and then some number b here. And we'll have those same things on the other side of our y-axis. So here is our y2 function. So here we just have some number b on our y-axis. We can't even draw it to scale because we don't know what b is. but our y2 will start at that number and then go up 3 more, up 6 more, up 9 more from the original one. So here's our quick sketch of these functions. So in summary, our f of x is the same as y. So our f of x will be our output, so that'll be our y values. Sketching is when you use the shape, key features, and a labeled axis, versus drawing is drawing your sketch essentially to scale. So you need all the same things as a sketch, except for you have to also have a scale. Key features include maximums, minimums, x-intercepts, y-intercepts, symmetry, and so on. And to solve for y, you use the y equals button on the calculator to graph functions. Then you use second trace, which is your calculate button, to find zeros, minimums, maximums, and intersection points. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching.